Throughout history, the story of invention has been told as a story about men. The great inventors, the great scientists, the great engineers. Their names fill textbooks, grace patents, and appear on the buildings of universities around the world. But running parallel to that story, largely unacknowledged, frequently uncredited, and sometimes deliberately erased, is another story entirely. The story of the women who quietly changed everything. Hi, I'm Professor Paula. Today I want to introduce you to a few women that you may have never heard of, which may lead you to ask why you were never taught this. We already know about Hedy Lamarr and her extraordinary contribution to wireless communication. But she was far from alone. If you haven't seen that video, you should watch it. She was quite an interesting woman. Across every field of human endeavor, medicine, engineering, computing, chemistry, material science, domestic technology, women were inventing, discovering, and creating at every point in history. The world just wasn't always paying attention. The next time you drive in the rain, you have Mary Anderson to thank for the fact that you can see where you're going. Born in Alabama in 1866, Anderson was visiting New York City in 1902 when she noticed that streetcar drivers had to stop and manually clear snow and rain from their windshields, sometimes leaning out of the vehicle entirely while it was moving. She went home and designed a hand-operated lever that controlled a rubber blade sweeping across the windshield from inside the vehicle. She patented her windshield wiper in 1903. When she tried to sell the patent to a Canadian manufacturing firm, they rejected it, telling her the device had no commercial value and would likely distract drivers. Her patent expired in 1920, just as the automobile industry was exploding, and windshield wipers were becoming standard equipment on every car manufactured. She never received a single cent in royalties. If you have ever used a computer, and you are using one right now to watch this video, you owe a significant debt to Rear Admiral Grace Hopper of the United States Navy. Born in New York City in 1906, Hopper was a mathematician who joined the Navy during World War II and was assigned to work on the Harvard Mark I computer, one of the earliest electromechanical computers ever built. Hopper's most revolutionary contribution came in 1952, when she developed the first compiler, a program that translates human-readable instructions into the machine code that computers actually understand. Before Hopper's compiler, programming a computer required writing instructions in complex binary machine code, a process so difficult and time-consuming that computers were largely inaccessible to anyone who wasn't a specialist mathematician. Hopper's compiler made it possible to write programs in something closer to human language. Every programming language that followed, from COBOL to Python to the code that runs every app on your phone, exists because Grace Hopper had the insight to bridge the gap between human thought and machine processing. She was famously quoted as saying that the most dangerous phrase in the English language is, "We've always done it this way." In 1965, a chemist named Josephine Kwolek was working at DuPont on a project to develop a lightweight, strong fiber for use in car tires. What she discovered instead was something that would eventually save hundreds of thousands of lives. Working with polymers at low temperatures, a technique her colleagues thought was unlikely to produce anything useful, she created a liquid crystalline solution that, when spun into fiber, produced a material of extraordinary strength. That material was Kevlar, 5 times stronger than steel by weight, heat-resistant, and extraordinarily tough. DuPont initially resisted developing it because the manufacturing process seemed impractical. Kwolek persisted. Kevlar was commercialized in 1971, and within a decade was being used in bulletproof vests, helmets, brake pads, fiber optic cables, and hundreds of other applications. The first police officer whose life was saved by a Kevlar vest was recorded in 1975. Since then, Kevlar body armor has been credited with saving the lives of over 3,000 police officers in the United States alone, a number that grows every year. Josephine Kwolek received the National Medal of Technology in 1996 and was inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame. She is one of the few women inventors whose contribution was fully acknowledged during her lifetime.
The subscribe button was invented for a reason. Please use it.
Josephine Cochrane didn't invent the dishwasher because she wanted to avoid doing dishes herself. Quite the opposite. She was wealthy enough to have servants for that. She invented it because her servants kept chipping her fine china while washing it by hand, and she was tired of losing her most prized possessions to careless cleaning. Born in Ohio in 1839, Cochrane set up a shed behind her house and began designing a machine that could wash dishes mechanically without breaking them. Working with a mechanic named George Butters, she developed a device that held dishes in wire compartments inside a copper boiler, while hot soapy water was pumped over them. She patented her dishwasher in 1886 and initially marketed it to hotels and restaurants rather than private homes, correctly predicting that the scale of commercial washing would make the machine most valuable in high-volume settings. The Cochrane Crescent washing machine company she founded eventually became part of KitchenAid. The domestic dishwasher didn't become a common household appliance until the 1950s, nearly 70 years after Josephine Cochrane invented it. Most historians of domestic technology consider her one of the most practically impactful inventors of the 19th century. Not all world-changing contributions come in the form of inventions. Sometimes, the most important thing a scientist can do is refuse to be pressured into approving something dangerous. Dr. Frances Oldham Kelsey did exactly that, and in doing so may have prevented one of the greatest medical disasters in American history. In 1960, Kelsey was a newly appointed reviewer at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration when she received an application to approve thalidomide, a sedative widely prescribed in Europe to pregnant women for morning sickness. Despite enormous pressure from the pharmaceutical company seeking approval, Kelsey repeatedly refused to sign off on the drug because she believed the safety data was insufficient. She was right. Thalidomide caused severe birth defects in thousands of children born in Europe and other countries where it had been approved. The United States was largely spared because one woman at the FDA held her ground against relentless pressure from a pharmaceutical company eager for approval. President Kennedy awarded Kelsey the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service in 1962. She continued working at the FDA until she was 90 years old. Mary Anderson, Grace Hopper, Stephanie Kwolek, Josephine Cochrane, Frances Kelsey, and Hedy Lamarr. 6 women across 6 different fields across more than a century of invention and discovery. 6 stories that most people have never heard told in full. But these 6 represent hundreds. Alice Parker, who patented central heating in 1919, whose gas furnace design laid the groundwork for modern home heating. Dr. Patricia Bath, who invented laser cataract surgery in 1986. Shirley Ann Jackson, whose research enabled caller ID and call waiting. Marie Curie, whose discoveries of polonium and radium literally created the field of radioactivity, and who remains the only person in history to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. The pattern across all of these stories is consistent and impossible to ignore. Women invented things that changed the world. They were frequently ignored, dismissed, uncredited, underpaid, and denied the recognition that equivalent contributions from men would have received automatically. Their patents were rejected. Their ideas were stolen. Their names were left off the papers. Their contributions were absorbed into institutions that took the credit for themselves. History is slowly correcting the record, but the correction is long overdue. The next time you drive in the rain, connect to Wi-Fi, wear body armor, or load the dishwasher, you are living in a world shaped in profound and practical ways by women whose names most people don't know. That is not a small thing. And it is not ancient history. It is the world we live in right now. Built in no small part by women who were told their ideas had no commercial value, their contributions were unimportant, and their names didn't need to be remembered. History begs to differ. So if you have daughters who drive you crazy with questions, or like to tear things up to see how they work, don't ignore them. Answer their questions. Help them to understand how those dismantled toys really work. You just never know. They could grow up to be the next big inventor. Just make sure you teach them to clap back when they're being ignored or being pushed to the side. I'm Professor Paula. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Dumb It Up.